Welcome to RemixEQLive, where we're amplifying equity with the remix of information, interviews, and inspiration to inform and inspire you to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and today I am broadcasting from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. And for those joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice in the comments. Let us know where you are joining us from and the equity work you do or aspire to do. And remember, Remix EQ Live is an experience that's meant to be shared. I encourage you to hit the share or invite buttons and bring along your people, your network, your family, your friends, your peeps to join our Remix EQ community today. And while those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers the opportunity for us to connect and build community with each other around the equity work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests, our viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative and effective ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, work, or play. So, throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to also share what you do to make the world a more just place. Today we open the third season of Remix EQ Live. And I am so grateful to you, my Remix EQ community, for your support. You have tuned into the live broadcast and watched and listened to episode recordings. And each time you show up and let us know you're here, you make visible an audience, a community of listeners and learners. And this is how we amplify work that leads to equitable outcomes by bringing attention to the people who do this work, as well as their perspectives and approaches. You have also contributed to our conversation, our professional dialogue. Your comments and questions have added examples, strategies, and tools to our professional repertoire and pushed us to reflect on our practice and the people and the places we serve. And finally, you have shared the good news of Remix EQ Live by inviting those in your personal and professional networks to tune in to the live broadcast or watch the recording. It is you who has grown the Remix EQ community. And I thank you. Woo, we have a comment. Oh, hello, Brianna Matchett. So excited for season 3. Yes, we are. And we'll kick it off. So, for those of you who are just joining us, this is Remix EQ Live. We are amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration to inform and inspire you to make the world a more just place. So, thank you for sharing and inviting others to tune in. And of course, I invite you to interact with us and today interact with me. Post comments, ask questions as we dive into this community participation show. You are part of the Remix EQ Live experience. You are part of the Remix EQ community. So, most of you know me as the host and producer of the show Remix EQ Live, but I, in fact, do wear many hats. Yes, and I make hats like this because my mama has always worn very fancy and fabulous hats to church. And so, when I think about donning a hat, it's always like a very colorful wide brim hat. It's like a veil. So, one of the hats that I wear often is my researcher hat. I design and study learning experiences for schools and communities. And I also use my research training and experience to evaluate programs for nonprofits and other mission driven organizations. So, when my team and I were reflecting on year 1 of Remix EQ Live, I may have talked us into conducting a small community participation study to glean some insight about how our Remix EQ members engage during and after our live broadcast. So across seasons 1 and 2, we identified 78 viewers as our most engaged. This means they wrote comments, they reshared the LinkedIn Live event before, during, after the broadcast, or they directly communicated with me about their experiences watching the show. And so we were able to document 162 interactions and code their engagement in the following ways. One, greeting and gratitudes, such as, "Hi, I'm Erica, joining from Savannah, Georgia, where I live." Or, "Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your work. I loved learning from you today," the guest. We also determined whether comments were amplifying content. Like, this is where you repeat or quote content shared by guests, the host, or other Remix EQ community members. Or you co-sign or agree to content such as, "Yes, Black women need to be at the data table." We also determined if contents were sharing content that was from Remix EQ community members. That is, they shared their expertise, their experiences. And this may look like them sharing like observations or examples from the communities they work in or serve, or describing challenges they face or equity-driven strategies or resources. And then finally, we determine if the contents were them asking questions of our guests or other Remix EQ community members. We also noted when Remix EQ community members invited their personal and professional networks to watch, listen, and engage in the show. And we use these engagement behaviors to compose 3 participation modes for our Remix EQ community, which I'm eager to share and discuss with you as ways for us to think together about the communities that we serve. All right. Hello, Tangie Williams from Dayton, Ohio, the Buckeye State. Happy to be here. And hey, hello, Keisha. It's good to see you from New York. Happy to be here. Yes. And hey, Chris from New Jersey, the Garden State. Really looking forward to this. Yes. I do not need to get in the habit of trying to determine the nicknames for each state. One of them is going to catch me. um, but thank you guys for tuning in and showing up so that we know that you are here and present. And I'm excited for you to be in our conversation today. So another fancy and fabulous church hat that I wear is that of a professional learning facilitator. So when I am working with K through 12 educators and leaders to design and deliver more equitable instruction, I often engage them in a collaborative learning experience. And I do this for 3 reasons. One is to model instructional practices that are more equitable. That is, how do we make the ideas of all students in our class visible? How do we find content that connects to their lived experiences? Or how do we use the knowledge that they're using or producing to make community change in the communities that are important and that matter to them? This collaborative learning experience also positions them as listeners and learners. So it gives them an opportunity to walk in the shoes of their students and remind them that they too, we all are lifelong learners. And finally, is to create a shared learning experience. Because if we're talking about a topic that they may not have a lot of experiences or instances in their life with, it provides an entry point into the discussion. And it also provides a bit of coherence because we're talking about the same thing, even if we're thinking about what it might look like back in our classrooms or our learning spaces. And this deepens our inquiry so that we can move our practice forward. So on today's episode, I'm using the RemixEQLive as our shared experience to discuss community participation for this reason. But my main purpose is really to prompt you to think about the communities in which you advance equity and how your members' participation affects your goals for change. So throughout our community participation study, we identified 3 participation modes: acknowledger, discussants, and ambassadors. So on average, across seasons 1 and 2, 40% of our most engaged viewers participated as acknowledgers, those who greeted us at the top of the show and throughout and closed out with gratitudes. So why is the acknowledger mode of participation important for communities? Well, number 1, they show up. right? In a digital space like RemixEQLive, the only way we know that you are here is if you tell us, and that's often with a hello or a thank you or some type of appreciation for the experience that you had with us. But more importantly, when community members show up online, in person, they acknowledge the space. They acknowledge the community and the importance of what's being discussed or what actions are being taken as a collective. They signal to others that this community space exists, that we are open to connecting with each other, and that for many of us who work toward equitable outcomes, that this is a possibility for change. Right? And nearly a third of our most engaged viewers participated as discussants. They amplified content, they shared their expertise and experiences, and they asked questions. So, why is the discussant mode of participation important for communities? And there are two reasons, at least. One is that these community members drive the dialogue of the community. They drive the action. They signal to others what ideas are being taken up by whom, and they reiterate and co-sign and agree to comments or experiences that are shared within the community. They are our internal amplifiers. But this is a double-edged sword, and I wanted to stop and make a point of this. So RemixEQLive is founded on the premise that we are inviting people who do this work toward equitable outcomes to give them voice. These are people who have been unheard, who have been often ignored because of history, because of exclusionary practices, racist practices. So the premise of this really is to amplify what they are saying, amplify the work that they are doing. And because of this, and because we are a small, nascent community, many of the people who join us to celebrate this work are like-minded. And so the discussant really does amplify what we want to hear, really does bring out the points that we are thinking about, and also if they're in questioning, they're really like moving us forward in our thinking. But for many of us outside of the RemixEQLive community who are working toward equity in our communities, we are working to eliminate, to minimize inequities that are put in place because of power. And so in our communities, which could be bounded by geography, our communities that could be bounded by workplace, we can often be in spaces in which community members might not share the same goals that we have for equitable outcomes, might become uncomfortable by the progress that we are making. And we want to make sure that we are recognizing the power dynamics and acknowledging the power dynamics that are in these spaces. Because when our discussants become dissenters, or our discussants become distractors of the goal that the collective community has established to move forward, we want to pay attention to that dialogue, because that signals to us that we need to figure out different strategies and different approaches to ensure that everybody is working toward that goal, or at least begin to have the discussions to tighten up our focus and our pathways for achieving that. And the second reason that discussant is an important mode of participation is that it pushes our thinking. So when our discussants are in line with the community goals that we have, or are bringing a new and fresh perspective to it, we want them to push our thinking. Their questions may prompt us to think about new perspectives. It may prompt us to think about people and places and the relationships between them differently. It might also push us to consider alternative pathways to the community or the collective goal, which might change our approach, might change our strategy, or might change our tools. Right? So our discussants are important because they push us to think or rethink our assumptions and expectations of what we think is necessary for change. All right. Hey, Keisha. Good. Yes. She says, good to see you, Erika, and I love your fabulous hat reference. Yes. All right. And our last participation mode is ambassadors. So 28% of our most engaged viewers were ambassadors. That is, they invited others to join the Remix EQ community by sharing the Remix EQ Live event before, during, and after the show. And sometimes they even shared what they learned during their experience or amplify the very important work of our guest. And why is this ambassador mode of participation important for communities? Well, if discussants are internal amplifiers, then ambassadors are external amplifiers. They extend the reach of our community to grow it. So we love ambassadors because they allow for us to bring in new people, to bring in new perspectives to work toward that collective goal. And when ambassadors grow our community, they also grow and change our community and allow for us to think and solidify and clarify our approaches toward making change in the community. So, of course, I want to empower all of you to embody all of these participation modes: the acknowledger, the discussant, and the ambassador roles during the Remix EQ Live experience. But the purpose of today was to really prompt you to reflect about your community where you do the work. So I'll leave you with a few reflection questions to consider with your communities. So if we think about the acknowledger, how do you create opportunities for your community members to show up and acknowledge the importance of your work or the importance of their participation in your work? And if we think from the discussant view, how do you facilitate opportunities for community members to contribute to the conversation and action in productive ways that move and push the community toward its collective goals? And then, in terms of the ambassador, how do you empower your community members to broaden and grow your reach in ways that matter to you and your community members? And the final point that I want to underscore is that the only way to grow your understanding of your community is to study it, right? You can observe, you can survey participants, you can schedule one-on-one conversations for a more intimate inquiry into how they're participating and why. But we must inquire and we must reflect on that, because the more that we know about our community, the more we enrich our community building and our action. So, of course, I want to see all the roles for ambassador and acknowledger in place. But one of the kind of takeaways in studying our community was the discussant. So, with Remix EQ Live, for those who haven't tuned into an interview show yet, we have a guest who is really sharing their experiences and their expertise with the community. And I'm asking them questions. And then, as a audience member, you have the opportunity to ask questions as well as amplify on what they're seeing. But sometimes I realize that our platform, because it's digital, because it's very public, it's harder for people to like ask questions or pose in that way. And that's fine. Like, I will always continue to invite you to ask questions and to invite you to share your expertise and comments, because I want you to do that. But I also want you to feel safe and not doing that, because I know that you are thinking about all the amazing things that our guests are saying. But I also it makes me think about, here's a platform and here's some of the affordances and limitations of it. But then what are other opportunities for us to continue and to have these conversations? And so that's why I created a new event, Remix EQ Seminar. And so this allows for a more intimate discussion among people who are trying to make the world a more just place, so that we can engage in those conversations, that we can push thinking, we can amplify the work that we are doing with our communities, and really position ourselves as listeners and learners as we build our professional knowledge and our motivations for doing this work. So, Remix EQ Seminar is a 15-day curated learning experience that empowers mission-driven professionals to make the world a more just place. And during this experience, I will curate and facilitate a welcoming and a supportive space for reflection, for knowledge building, and for inspiration. For those who might feel overwhelmed by the inequities of the world, who might feel isolated from others who are doing this very important work of centering equity, and or maybe be unsure about how to become or move along in the trajectory as a change maker. And Remix EQ seminar is really similar to RemixEQLive, right? An opportunity to build community with other change makers across fields and disciplines as you explore themes of identity, inquiry, and impact. It really is an opportunity for us to learn from each other practices that we might not have been trained in, or practices that we might not have discovered yet, so that we can take them back to our communities and really try to make change. Your investment grants you exclusive access to daily curated content delivered to your inbox. So each day you will receive examples, you will receive questions to prompt your thinking, you will receive tools to help you document and work through that, so that on once a week that when you attend our 90-minute live virtual session, you'll have an opportunity to engage in that rich discussion with other change makers in the cohort, so that we can really push each other and ask questions and ask for elaboration about the things that we are doing in our community. You also have access to an online community to continue those conversations with each other when new ideas and new experiences come to light. And of course, you get our Amplify notebook so that you can document that change that is happening within the way that you're thinking, the perspectives that you take on, or the different practices that you are trying out in your community. As part of the Remix EQ seminar, you will clarify your why, like why you have chosen to do this work. You will articulate your approach to centering equity in your work, and you will empower your next steps to making the world a more just place. So for more information, please visit the website that's on the screen. Our next cohort starts on February 20th, and I would love for you to continue to be a part of the Remix EQ community in a different way, in a deeper way, so that we can make those connections and move the change forward. All right. And of course, it's not just about my discussants, right? I want my acknowledgers to show up and hold space for these important conversations. And I want my ambassadors to share the good news about RemixEQLive. So I too will show up every second and fourth Friday of this season at 11:30 a.m. Eastern with my fancy, fabulous guests. For that. So I will be back on the second Friday in February to begin our interview shows. And so our season lineup includes, that was my drum roll. We will begin and kick off our interview season by applying an anti-racism lens to our discussion of educational leadership with Dr. Tracy Benson. We will also dive into the intersectional computing, so another perspective in the STEM space, with Drs. Jaquita O. Thomas and Dr. Yolanda Rankin. And we're going to the theater, darling. We will be talking about diversifying representation in the arts with Marjorie Kennedy and Jonathan McQuarrie. And then we will be changing the narrative of Black maternal health with Kimberly Seals Allers. And we will close out our interview season by catalyzing social change with Deepa Iyer. So this is an exciting, very interdisciplinary season where we are going to be able to learn from our experts, give voice to the work that they're doing, amplify their perspectives and their approaches as we build our professional repertoire, as we build our knowledge and our skill set, so that we can move forward the work that we're doing in their community. So I invite you to tune in, watch your feed, check your inbox, so that you have the details to tune into the next show and learn about our upcoming Remix EQ events. So until then, visit the Remix EQ webpage for past episodes and more information about our inspiring guests and our upcoming shows, and check out new ways to support the Remix EQ community via donation and purchasing our merch with the Amplified Notebook. And while you're there, please poke around the website, learn more about my business, Blue Knowledge, which advances equity in schools and communities. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. And of course, I invite you to connect with me in this space too. Thank you so much for tuning in to this Remix EQ Live community. Thank you for tuning in to our season 3 kickoff and our discussion about community participation. I appreciate your engagement and your comments, and of course, your ongoing support, which keeps us inspired to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and this is RemixEQLive. See you next time.